First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Yeah.
Oh, we're recording already.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, so let's just dive in. No small talk.
Why?
Well, we just recorded something, so what are we gonna? We just did an hour and a half of small talk already.
Was that small talk? That felt like big talk.
Oh God, I'm so hungry.
Today is gonna be. Are you cooking in your new place a lot or no?
Yeah, I've been cooking. Yeah, actually.
Sometimes when you're not settled, it can feel hard to cook. You know what I mean?
Yes, but no, I've been cooking. I've been making fried chicken with cornflakes. You ever done that?
No.
In the air fryer?
Never made fried chicken with cornflakes.
No,
that's
insane. That's very common. What you do is you take the fried, well, especially if you're doing it in an air fryer, you do the flour, the egg, and then you have crushed cornflakes.
We do like almond flour shit.
Yeah. But if you want like an actual crispy, like a super crispy chicken, you use cornflakes.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yep. It's common.
We don't really eat a lot of fried chicken, but I'll tell you that what we will do kind of similarly, and I actually did yesterday, is we'll if you have like skin on thighs or breasts, even bone in, and you pan sear, it's so good. And I was thinking this, it tastes like fried chicken. Anyway,
I like my air fryer.
Yeah, I love the air fryer.
The air fryer is
we did green
always
beans
good.
in the air fryer yesterday.
Oh, green beans.
Really good.
Mm. Oh, I know what else I got? I got one of those mandolin slicers.
Mm-hmm.
Those are great. I made a cucumber salad with that, with like red onion and like so good. Well, because I'm like, that was fucking delicious.
Yeah.
Period.
I don't. Did we get rid of it? We might have gotten rid. No, we have a mandolin. We've had a couple mandolins. I think we actually might need a new one.
It's the only way to cut veggies. I'm like, this is why have I been wasting my time cutting veggies any other way?
Well, what vegetables besides cucumbers and potatoes?
What other Well, like I like a
peppers.
Yeah, get them shits. Juliet's like, well, mine is different settings. You just shit's good. That shit's good. I mean, maybe you have to slice it afterwards, but like
yeah. I hear that.
Mm.
So today's episode, this has been something that we've been talking about a little on and off, both advertently and inadvertently for years, I would say, actually, because it's all about the power of high school theater in particular and how it shaped us. The reason why I think this is a really relevant, relatable topic is I think that most people, no matter where they are in their artistic lives, honestly, and I would argue artistic lives across all mediums, dance, tech, visual, it doesn't matter, even filmmakers, I think a lot of it stems back to high school theater.
Yes.
And I think a lot of it stems back to high school theater because I would argue that it is where it all kind of began for a lot of people in terms of, there's this thing that with these really interesting people that allows me to express myself and be uniquely myself. And
of course,
first maybe got bit by the bug of I could do this beyond just after school from 4 to 8 or whatever the hell it was for most people.
Yeah, and of course there are a lot of exceptions to the rule, but I think that those exceptions prove the rule. I think that most people who are performing, especially, I would say, performing of any kind, have probably did a theater in high school. of some
You
or
haven't experienced this with like stage managers and designers too, many of whom also like
that's
performed.
true. Stage managers, designers, filmmakers. I think that's a little bit more of a stretch. I think filmmakers come from more of a diverse background a lot of times, but a lot of them do come from that 100%. You know, visual artists maybe not, but yes, like.
But it's funny, the visual artists were often painting our sets. In fact, in my high school, which we'll talk about, our teachers, Patrick Dearborn, who ran the program, was also the head visual artist teacher.
Oh, interesting.
So he taught art history. And a lot of times his kids, the students, would come and they would, if not help design, they would build and or paint the set a lot of times. So I hear what you're saying. But I hear what you're saying.
No, I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, yeah, I think it is a imperative moment for a lot of people. I think it is and by the way, people, of course, who don't even end up going into performing arts, it's or any type of artistic discipline. A lot of people do it and, have really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not fundamental, but big moments in their life and who they are were sort of established during that time. I would argue it's very informative. That's a very informative time in their lives. So
because even though for me at least, mine started in actually elementary school. I remember that was when I was first started playing saxophone really seriously and started singing really in earnest. But I heard something. Is there music? Yeah, what is that?
Can you hear it? Do you hear it now?
No, it's gone. It was like little, like almost like
anyway. Yeah, it was me.
Oh. So even though mine started probably when I was, I don't know how old I was, 7, 8, even in middle school when I got really serious, when I moved to New Jersey and really started going in and auditioning even as a kid, but it was high school and we had a thing, SVPA, the School of Visual and Performing Arts, that not only solidified, but I auditioned for my first Broadway show when I was 16 and I started really, that was when, and it was specifically both, and this is who because the structure of the episode, excuse me, I'm going to talk to a few people who were deeply influenced by our time at high school, and Mike's going to speak with an actual teacher. The two people that were most influential, Patrick Dearborn and Pat Woodward, actually have both passed now. But Mike, I would argue that those two people ultimately became the reason why I'm doing this today, who not only inspired me, but challenged me enough to go well beyond what I thought I was capable of and to tell me, to validate how uniquely talented I was, and provide diverse opportunities for me to really grow.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause, for me, I started doing like community theater when I was like 8 or 9. And I always wanted to do this, so it's like, my high school, like, although the teachers I had were super informative and we'll talk about that, it's like I probably would have ended up doing it anyway. It's because I was in love with it so much and it's what I wanted to do. And I had I had some really good community theater and like youth theater experiences that were like, what was really special about sort of even like including high school, but, even leading up to high school was like, I did something called Performance Lab, which was like the Warner Theater in Torrington, Connecticut. They did something called Performance Lab where it was like we were doing Pygmalion. Like I did Pygmalion by Shaw when I was like 12. And like I was Henry Higgins. And like, the woman who ran it, it was super. They had a little tiny black box. And like, we would rehearse it and it was just like, we would go there and rehearse and it was I always had, I would say like even like pretty even though like there wasn't a ton of money, I would say, in like the programs I was a part of, there was a lot of sense of independence. Like that's kind of what was really special about, and why it's still, you know, special, is that the sense of community, the sense of belonging you have, you know, and I would argue independence, you know, because my high school theater experience was, you know, I along with Michael, your boyfriend, you know, we there was something called the Great Hartford Academy of the Arts. It had a half day program. So what happened is you would go to your public school, and this was all over Connecticut. You go to your public school till like 12, and then everybody would get bussed in to Hartford, and then you would have, you know, there was this campus, and you would, you know, spend, you know, basically you were there from like 1 to like, you have classes from like 1 to 5, really, and then you would have like rehearsals, like sometimes till like 8 o'clock at night or something. And, you know, so that was the reason why Academy was so fucking important. It was really, like, I would say it was a pre-professional, like it was a good pre-college sort of program, because, you know, we were doing Suzuki when I was, you know, a freshman in high school and sophomore in high school. We were building, you know, the people I want to talk to about this, you know, Joni Weisfeld, like, you know, her whole class was basically like, you know, we get texts, we get like, you know, the Trojan women, and she would just let us devise a piece for like a physical performance piece for like, you know, an hour and a half, and we would build sort of like this big theatrical performance piece. So it was all this like very devised, very, because I wanted to go to experimental theater wing at NYU. Like that was like my dream, was to get into that, because that's sort of what my theater training was. It was very like experimental, it was very like physical, it was very, you know, in high school. So it really shaped me, because it gave me a sense of independence, because I was like I would say a leader, like in a lot of ways there, in terms of the devising work, in terms of whatever. And, you know, I'll say this, and I don't mind saying this, it was, you know, a lot of losers obviously do high school theater, I would argue, or traditionally unpopular people, especially men. Like, you know, some women, you know, because if, you know, the popular dudes do sports, or at least in most schools. And that's how it was at like my public school. So like I wasn't a loser at my public school, but I was kind of a non-entity. And then when I go to Academy, it was completely different. I was a star, right? Because I was like the straight guy. I was, you know, attractive, you know, and I was talented. And so like there, I like my shit didn't stink. So it was a very sort of clear like distinction between like the normie muggle world or whatever. Not, I hate saying that, because I feel like I don't know, some like a loser saying that, but like the sort of normal muggle world of high school, right? And then you enter this other space where the social status, the social strata is completely on its head. And like the people who aren't necessarily popular,
you know what you're
you know
bringing
what I mean?
up. I think I don't think anything's changed, and I want to be clear what I mean about
Oh,
that.
sure.
No, but because I think the point about that is that's where you you shined.
Sure.
So what makes you, what I imagine people to this day are like, oh, Mike or whatever, Joshua, you know, the thing is, I was saying this in therapy the other day. It's how I relate to I'm not going to say who it was, because it's so random and it's a random story, and it certainly wouldn't matter to the listeners, and it would barely matter to you. But I was texting with someone yesterday who has always been very dismissive of me, and this is a person in the industry who doesn't really know me or my work that well.
Who is it? Just say it.
Actually, you do know who they are. Actually, this is very funny. You do know this person. I'm going to say you can bleep it out. So you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yes, of course.
So I've known this person for a long, long time, and we were texting about something random, and this person has always, and we've never worked together, but we've always known who the other person was. And this person's a bit basic then. I mean, interesting for what they are,
100%.
but a bit basic.
Well, interesting and in the ways that they can't help. Let's just say that.
Exactly.
It's not like a personality thing. Let's just say that.
But they are talented. They've got that, they got that great fucking voice. And but I was thinking, but this is, I swear this will make sense. I was thinking, well, I just got to get into a room with them so they can see what I do, because the second people see what I do, then it's a whole other conversation, and it's a whole other level of respect. And I'm not trying to be braggadocious. It's just where I can show who the fuck I am and what makes me me. And I'm saying this in relation to this idea of high school theater because the same thing came true. You're making a great point. When I walk the halls, otherwise, it doesn't. I remember we did Les Mis when I was a junior, and I had a 16 or a 17 average in my AP chemistry. I took a bunch of AP courses. Don't ask me why. I had this AP chemistry course. And sweetheart, I shouldn't say his name because he came to see me in the show. And afterwards he said, listen, I don't even need you to do well on the test. I need you to come take this test, and we're going to bring your grade up to a D. I had a 17. I was well away from a D. He goes, and we're gonna bring your average up to a D. Why? Because I know you don't want to be here. I saw what you did on the stage. I know that's what you want to do. And he did. He passed me. He didn't fail me because of what I was able to do. What he saw,
it's a really
me come alive.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And it's like, it's I love that story because it's like you get to, in a quote, God, this is gonna sound like so gay, but it's like, it's like the normal world of high school. It's like, I don't necessarily come alive there, right? Because it's like I don't play sports, and I'm
wearing shoes that say one says "la" and the other says "bod."
No, that it's true, and it's like the eccentric sort of people or whatever the fuck, like they don't get to be. They're othered, whatever. I hate talking like this because I feel like, I don't know, but it's like they're othered, they're not viewed as part of sort of the mainstream. And so like, this is a space where
let it out.
You can let it out and you can be you a lot of times and you're validated, right? You're validated and you're respected. And so, it really does, build confidence, right? It builds
a sense of self,
and like, oh, I do have, yes, maybe I don't have, and look, that's anything. That's chess club, that's debate team, that's sports, right? I mean, somebody could be a fucking idiot and it's like, but that's where they belong, is on the football field. And it's like, or whatever. It's not unique to this, but so everybody needs that, I think, in high school, like, especially, which is brutal.
I do just want to say, because we're going to now talk to, at least I'm going to, again, I said Pat and Pat are both passed. So we're going to talk, but that's going to be my focus of these interviews, because they were so formative for me. They had such high expectations. This is why I'm lifting them up. They were loving and they were hard, and they challenged us.
Yeah.
And the audition processes were brutal. There was an expectation of excellence for high school that prepared me in a way that I am forever grateful for. And I learned about myself and art, and just to say, as a random example, that same production of Les Mis, we flew to England because it wasn't playing on Broadway. So Patrick, Mr. Dearborn, organized a trip to England for the cast of, or what was going to be the primary principals of Les Mis, to go see the show. And really, though, what it was we went and saw Jerry Springer the Opera and Anything Goes, and we saw all these other shows in England. And it was that, and then we participated in the statewide and then the national thespian festival. That production of Les Mis also took us to Papermill. That's why I met Jelani. We participated in Papermill Rising Star Awards. Why do I say all this? Because my whole world was the School of Visual Performing Arts. My whole world was about that after-school program.
Yes, same.
where I also hooked up with a guy for the first time and then dated his sister a year later. I really did. And it was like a whole other, like, it was like a coming of age, a coming of artist, a coming of, it was all of those things. And I'm so grateful to Pat and Pat. And I'm excited to talk to some of my
Yeah,
high
and
school
I
friends
think
about
what's special, just one other thing I want to raise, right, is like what's special about it too is that you're surrounded by people. The homogeny of it actually is kind of a special experience, right? Because assumedly, if you're going there, I know this was a big thing that kind of fucked my school up, was that it was, and by the way, most of the kids, Hartford, Connecticut's a very, it's one of the poorest cities in the world. And it's like, but this was actually a haven because 50% of the school was kids from Hartford who were getting out of their horrific, public schools to go there. But there was a ruling. I just think this is kind of important to say that it was that the half day program was violated Brown versus Board of Ed, and they had and the audition process violated Brown versus Board of Ed, and so they had to convert it to a full day program, and then they had to stop auditions, and it became a lottery program. And for years I would talk to my teachers and they were like, it's terrible, because basically it was a lot of kids who were not interested at all in film, theater, dance, visual arts, music. They weren't interested at all in it. And they were just there because they like won a lottery program to get out of school, and it brought down everything. It like fucked the school up basically.
Yes.
And made it basically turned, not to sound like rude, but it basically turned the school into like a Harvard public school. So it wasn't even a fucking safe haven for kids who, like, again, most of the kids there were from these, because it was people from all over Connecticut. And I say this because it highlights what makes high school theater important, was that you're surrounded by people who care on some level about the same thing.
Yeah. No, I think
and that's a really special experience, as everybody there is there for the same reasons. And yes, there's petty dramas, and yes, there's all the crazy shit that happens, cast parties, getting drunk, hooking up, whatever the fuck, a lot of emotion, competition, jealousy. But, what's beautiful is you're with your people. You're with people who care about the same things you care about.
Yeah.
And that's a really special experience. And so, yeah.
Who are you going to interview?
I'm not going to say it because I don't know who I'm going to be able to get. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, we're going to start with my interviews. So, enjoy. Hey friends, so I'm going to tee up the next 3 interviews just all in one, just for ease's sake and clarity. So I had a number of people who I went to high school with who agreed to sort of chat, since, as you heard me say, the wonderful Pat Woodward and Pat Dearborn are no longer with us. So for this episode, I spoke with Tommy Crawford, Corey Wheelahan, Rebecca Flanders, and her mom, Bunny Flanders, for the little mom-parent perspective. And we're going to kick things off, though, with Tommy. Tommy Crawford is an actor, musician, composer, and singer-songwriter. He's developed over 100 new plays in New York City and regionally with companies like Ensemble Studio Theater, Ars Nova, The Flea, and NAMP. As co-founder of the Drama Desk-nominated band The Lobbyists, Tommy blends music and theater with recent composing credits including Miss Mitchell, The Golden Spike, and Twelfth Night. On stage, he's been seen in The Minutes, Ironbound, Twelfth Night, and Only Yesterday, which was a New York Times Critics Pick. A lifetime member of EST, Tommy lives in Vermont with his wife, director Sarah Wansley, and their 2 kids. Up next is the world premiere of the Vermont Farm Project at Northern State, which is the new musical he wrote. Then we'll have Corey Wheelahan, who is an educator and actor based in New Jersey. He holds a BFA in acting from Ithaca College and has appeared off-Broadway at the Pearl Theater, off Broadway with Smith Street Stage and regionally with Push Cart Players, among many more. For the last 3 years, he's been a full-time teacher at Ironbound Academy Elementary, which is a Newark public school. And while his pursuit of a career in education has led to a brief hiatus from the business of show, he does continue to appear in film and theater projects as they pop up. Most recently appearing in the short film Rotting Unseen, directed by his former student, Jacob Kelly. And then we have wonderful Rebecca Flanders and Bunny Flanders. Rebecca is a wonderful musician and actor, and I believe now is doing a lot of physical therapy work or physical masseuse work. And she, I know, went to the University of Miami for musical theater, and her mom is the director of development for the Valerie Fund in New Jersey, whose mission is to provide individualized care to children at medical centers close to home, because they believe the most effective way to heal children is to care, to treat them emotionally, socially, and developmentally, as well as medically. Super different perspectives. Just wanted to give you some brief background on them as we head into each of those conversations. So enjoy. Well, so I already teed up a bit of what we're exploring, which is ultimately the power of our high school theater experiences. That I do, and it could be the lack thereof. You'll have your own opinion. I do think that there was something uniquely special about our little subset in our Montclair High School, the School of Visual and Performing Arts, SVPA. It felt that way to me.
I think it definitely felt that way, especially when we were in high school. I think there was
Sure
cultivating it. There was definitely a cultivation of a sense of like, oh, this is a really cool thing that we're doing. But also, I mean, I don't have a ton of experience with like other high schools, but I get the sense that it was pretty unique. Sure. And both for the people who were involved, the sort of level of production value, the freedom that we had as students to pursue interests. And
what do you mean? Tell me more about that. I forget.
I don't know, like when we would do the children's theater show that toured around, and that was like completely student driven.
What was that?
See, you didn't even know about it.
Was I in it?
I don't know. I did it a couple of the years, I think, and I remember, I think my best memories are when I was a freshman and a senior. Freshman was when Jess Fish had, I think, started it. And it was like a thing that we just did on Saturdays, and we would go and do shows for little kids. So we did like Dr. Seuss.
Wow, I wasn't included. That's okay. No, he goes to Dr. Seuss.
Senior year, I remember it well because I like adapted Lyle Crocodile, and then and it was like, I feel like you were involved. I feel like you had to have been involved. Like Adam Shapiro did music for it, and like we drove around with the set in my car, and I don't know. That's what. And Michael Bloom played the crocodile. That's what I remember.
Yes. I mean, I know all these. I remember, of course, Adam and Bloom and Jess. I remember Jess. Oh my gosh, and Jess Fish and Jess Appel. There were two different Jesses. So a sense of autonomy. Yeah, that makes sense as to why SVPA. I think that's right. And we did that show at it was called Celebrations, exactly, wasn't it? Yeah. Where we got to sort of do our own thing. I'll also say that for me, Pat Woodward and Patrick Dearborn, Patrick Dearborn ran SVPA, but Pat Woodward was hired just for the first show of the year that we did a thing called Showcase, which was a themed medley of music. The one I remember was A Night at the Round Table, which was all Cole Porter and Gershwin. But the reason why I bring up the two of them in particular is in relation to our experiences, because I felt like there was a real demand for excellence. I felt like the two of them truly pushed us as young artists and expected quality.
Oh yeah, I mean there's no question about that. I think I think it was run like a little mini conservatory almost, and we had our auditions, and we we worked on. I mean, the rehearsals themselves were. I'm trying to remember, but I mean, I do remember really, really clearly as a freshman stepping in to the showcase show, auditioning for that, and that was our first one. That was where we met. That was the first show we ever did there. We were like 14, and but I remember just loving the music so much.
Yes.
And like just falling in love with it during that show, falling in love with the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was excellent, and the band was excellent, and the cast was excellent, and but you know, the thing that I think sticks out also to me, and I was thinking about this just before the conversation here, was also the community that they cultivated, and I felt like that that was extremely unique, especially like coming into a new school. But like the amount, like the kids that came from all different parts of the school, like you had like lacrosse players and artists and people who only wore black, and you, and like the goth kids, and you had like visual artists, musicians, actors, literati. You had all these different people coming together, and I thought that was like so cool, so unique. You got to make so many friends.
And what do you think that was? Why do you think that happened? What was the shared experience, or the shared leadership, or the shared feeling that allowed all those people to sort of grow and prosper?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there was energy and excitement and fun. It was really fun. I think
it was fun.
I think that Pat, like each cultivated a certain, well, certainly Dearborn had like, you know, the cult of Dearborn, and there was like, you know, I mean, he was like a legendary figure for high school students, and you know, it's like
totally. I mean, it's Harvey Firestein running a theater
right,
program.
plus Shih Tzus.
Yes, plus Shih Tzus, exactly.
So it was, I mean, you know, it was like, it became this very sort of mythic thing to, I think, participate in. And there were endless commentaries and jokes that could happen outside of rehearsal, you know, behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
Sort of building the aura, building the, right? I think.
Yes, no, I was thinking about our trip to London.
Oh my God. Yeah. Which I think I missed that.
No, you did, but I was thinking about this because when Patrick broke his ribs, and it became quite. We fell down the escalator.
People couldn't stop.
When we first got to
Heathrow, reenacting that, like for like
oh my
years.
God, it was so okay. So you're still very much a creative today. How did your experience at SVPA kick off your seriousness for a professional career, if it did at all, if that even feels true to you?
Well, first of all, since we're talking about high school theater, I thought, you know, I should also like talk about my dad a little bit, who ran his own high school theater department for most of his career as a English teacher. So I kind of grew up going to his plays in high school, and going behind the scenes and seeing the way people made the sets and playing on them, and I loved that. So I was a little bit primed for it, although I had never really had an interest to be a performer until I was older, until I was 13, 14. And I really auditioned for SVPA a little bit on a lark. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to really do this sort of thing.
Did your dad encourage you at all?
They never pushed me in any direction. And I think it was like Paul Michael. I remember everybody, you know, but Paul Michael,
Paul Michael Huseman
probably like cornered me at one point and was like, "You've got to audition," you know. And it was that sort of like community thing. It's like, oh, here's this junior, you know, in my first 2 weeks in school telling me I should audition. I guess I should, you know. And this like very friendly, charismatic junior, right? Paul was like the nicest guy.
Very sweet.
And
Our Jesus in
right,
God's
exactly. So how can you say no to Jesus?
Exactly.
And so I auditioned, and you know, I had always loved musicals, and I grew up going to musicals, and so when I got in, I think it kind of blew my mind just how much I loved doing it, and like a true sort of like kindled a love for it, and that was partly the people, it was partly the music, it was partly the craft of it, and so I wanted more, and I probably had more of an interest in going out for the play that year, which I then did, and was in the play, and that so
The
I
Good
think that
Doctor
year was the Laramie Project. Yeah.
Oh, that was Laramie
you know,
Project.
and so that was like a pretty.
Oh yeah, we did that. Who were you in that again? I don't. I think I was. Wait, was I the killer? I think I had to shave my head. I think I was the killer. I think I was one of the killers. That's what I think I. Anyway, okay, yes, the Laramie Project for sure.
So obviously that's a deep play to do, and as a 14-year-old, it's like it's heady stuff, but I think it like deepened my commitment to it, and then I didn't go out for the musical because I was playing baseball, if you recall.
Once upon a mattress.
So I was involved in sports and stuff, and then I think it was the next year that
Tommy's very well rounded.
The next year I decided to be even more invested in the theater, and then of course I think everything kind of leveled up with Les Mis.
That was our old, so yes, and Tommy was Javert, and I was Valjean, and I remember that
we used to put facial hair on each other in the dressing.
Yes. Oh my gosh, our little dressing rooms. You know, I haven't been back there in years. Have you gone back? Oh,
I haven't been back in a long time. Ages. Although I was texting with some people yesterday, some friends from our year, and apparently it's our 20th coming up. Which
20th anniversary.
Horrifying.
Oh my gosh, that's right. That is our 20th anniversary. Or is it what do you call it? I mean, have there been I've never been invited to a reunion. I would probably go because I still go back to Montclair because it's great food. You know, I go back from time to time. Because I like Montclair a lot. Okay, but wait. I lost my question. Oh yes, this is what I was saying. So we did Les Mis, and then this was the year. So this is funny. We had never competed in the Rising Star Awards, which were these things that Pigmo Playhouse did. And this, to your point, like Les Mis seemed like a very important show for Patrick Dearborn, Mr. Dearborn, and so he was giving it all he got. And we did it. So they submitted to the Pigmo Rising Star Awards, and we participated. There was a bunch of nominations, and we got to perform. And then, though, we didn't win anything, if I remember correctly. I don't think we won.
Scandal of scandals.
And I mean, who cares? But Patrick, remember, he was like quoted in the paper as being like, "Well, there's a bunch of nepotism." Like he was pissed.
Outrageous.
He couldn't believe it that we didn't win anything. We looked like such assholes. Why would you do that?
Oh yeah,
do you remember all that?
I do. I have vague memories, but I do remember it. Yeah. Yeah, I remember. I mean, I just thought that was a beautiful show, though. People loved that show, and it was great. Yes. We were great in it, and it was and like, I mean, dude, it was like Broadway creative team. It was like Greg DeLugos was the MD.
What's his name? And yes. What was his name? I was thinking about him. How do you spell his last name?
I didn't look it up, but he was a very influential figure for me. I found him like an incredible MD. And
I remember that.
He was very encouraging to me, like in terms of like music. He sort of maybe identified something in me that I was only vaguely aware of in terms of like musicianship. And that was cool, and he was great, and he was like just awesome to work with. And so
And you're still, just to be clear, Tommy's still you're very active musician today.
Music is like hand in hand with acting. Like I do them both pretty equally.
Well, that's interesting, if I may, because this is why I was interested in this topic, because people seeing something in us at that age and nurturing that, even Paul Michael Huseman, I would argue, going up to you and saying you should audition, and then you seeing that realize itself, and then people like being, us being afforded the opportunity to work with people like Greg DeLugos, who I do remember.
And Rick Sordelay was the fight coach, because of course his kids were involved, but
of course,
it's Rick Sordelay.
Of course. Oh yeah. No, I always Rick and Christian have, they did a play for me that I produced in 2016. Actually, it was supposed to be Christian, and then because no shade to Christian, but I went to it was practically a favor. So I went to Christian and I was like, would you be willing to do something? We could throw you, like, it was like a few $100s, Tommy. And then he couldn't do it last minute. So Rick came in and did the work for us.
And the same thing happened with the show that I was doing in 2015. I don't think that I even set that up. It was maybe more of a coincidence. But then, like, when we found out that each other were involved, it was amazing,
Isn't that funny? I spoke with, I ran into Rick like last month, who was on the phone with Colin, Sordelay. And I say this because I've been in touch with Christian and now kind of Colin and Rick, but I haven't re-engaged Kaylin in many, many years. Do you know what she's up to? Now this is just our high school retrospective now.
I'd love to see them. I'd love to see them all.
We should have some sort of SVPA reunion. I will say I did reach out to whoever ran it, or maybe that's her name, Melissa. I don't know. She never responded to me, and so I just never tried again. But we should have.
We should, and even the idea of like an alumni, network of some kind is a nice idea.
I agree.
I don't know all these. I don't know what they're doing now, but just to know that there are people who are working in the field.
Well, to your point about community, and again, this idea of what these moments of inspiration mean for us to work with certain people and to be afforded opportunities, I totally agree. So you sort of said it, but the last question I'll ask you was, if you had to sort of identify one defining moment that you wouldn't forget from your experience with SVPA, what would that be for you?
That's a great question. There's so many, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. No.
I feel like for me, probably Les Mis was close to the most defining, and like maybe doing that show. Actually, doing that show that spring, like I think it was like around my birthday too. It was really cool. But also like the first show that we did together was the showcase. Was kind of defining. I'm trying to think of. I wish I could pinpoint it to one moment. That's your question, and I'm trying to do that.
No, it's a little unfair. It's a little unfair because it was so long ago. Because we're old now, and there were so many.
Also, Ragtime. Ragtime was really great. That was another kind of amazing one.
That was our senior year.
I wish I could give you a better answer. I'm trying to think. Like something that takes it all together,
Well, like let me. This is a weird one, but like I'll just say something. Opening night of Les Mis, there was a moment I remember. I was upstairs on the second floor, and Mr. Dearborn was like, "I want you to go stand in front of a mirror and just tell yourself anything you need to tell yourself because you've got this." It was like, and he walked in this room, and I'm like looking at me, he's like, "You've got this. Say that." And no, it was weird. But Tommy, it was what was defining, like why that sticks with me is, again, people who believed in us And as young people who are in this formative developmental stage, to have people who saw you, and you're right, whether it was Greg or, we were afforded a lot of great opportunities at, performance-wise there because they saw us, and that's something that's you can't buy that.
No,
You know?
and indeed, we never had to pay anything.
Yeah, exactly. But I just mean in life, like that's kind of invaluable being
It is,
being
but
seen.
it's kind of, I mean,
you know
like
what
the
I
fact that
mean?
it came out of a public education is like public
Exactly.
education.
Exactly. Well, it's an interesting takeaway. Like maybe that because like I've always subsequently been a fan of public education. I think it's because I had a good experience primarily
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
SVPA. That was
and the passion of
well,
the people involved and their dedication to their students and their own craft. I mean,
exactly.
Dearborn was a craftsman, I mean, the dude was an artist, and like he built what he built because of his own artistic vision, right? It's like it's like
100%.
he knew how to work with kids to a degree,
Kind of.
Right.
We love you,
did.
Mr.
We do.
But
that's part of the love,
exactly.
but also like he was an artist, and he approached it that
Yeah.
way, and I think that that conveyed maybe implicitly a respect for the whole form to the people involved. Not to say that there weren't a lot of rocky moments, but like when is there not in high school?
Of course.
But I think like being a part of something that felt cohesive and beautiful and intentional
and important, right? Yeah, intentional is a better way to say it. To your point about Les Mis, I remember it felt like a moment, right? Like people wanted tickets. Like it was a moment in like people were like, "Oh, go see Les Mis at Montclair High School." Like where does that happen? But there was an energy that made it feel like we were part of something. To your point, a community where, at least for me, an identity was forming. A sense of self, a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I don't think I would still be. I don't know. I don't know if I would be an actor today if it wasn't for SVPA, because it sort of took me to another level.
Yeah, and it opened. I think it did open windows, and they're even like. I mean, like, look, Montclair is also a very unique town, with its proximity to New York and its proximity to theater professionals. Like there were a lot of people whose parents worked in the field who we went to school with. And that in and of itself, I think it shows you something is possible.
Oh yeah. Well, let's be really clear. Priscilla Lopez, I'll say the name. Oh my God. Priscilla Lopez, original Diana Morales in Chorus Line, Tony nominee for what was that Ukraine show? It was about Harpo Marx. A night in Ukraine, a night in something, an evening in Ukraine. Anyway, anyway. I'll never forget hearing that Priscilla Lopez, because both of her kids, I think, or just one, both, were in the program, and that she was in the audience. I would like peek my head out the curtain. I was just like little. And Kelly Bishop came to a show too. Kelly Bishop was Tony nominated for Chorus Line too. These are two icons. So anyway, yes, this is the proximity of the world that we were in. Well, Tommy, listen, we'll organize our reunion. Thank you so much for
my pleasure,
being
Josh.
part of
It's
this.
nice
really
to see you. Nice to reminisce, which I haven't reminisced about high school in a while.
This idea of the power of what high school theater was for us. For you to be back in education yourself, what for you demarcates a good teacher?
Wow, that's a loaded question. It's a great question. I think a good teacher is someone who meets a student where they are, and that applies for traditional academics. That applies for art students. A good teacher will meet a student where they are and will help bring them forward to the next level and will help them grow to to just basically fill their own potential and it's different for everybody, but everyone is capable of growth. Everyone is capable of learning and development, and everyone has strengths and intelligences in different areas. So I think a truly great teacher is someone that can recognize all those different strengths and intelligences, and I guess in the sense of a theater educator, really use that to create an ensemble, which I think is something that Pat and Pat did very well. I mean, it did come with its share of toxicity and drama, like, let's be honest, but I think every high school theater does. But I really do think that something that sticks with me to this day with my time in high school theater was that sense of community that was created. And I think that was because we did have two very good teachers who were able to recognize and develop the individual talents in front of them and really shape them into an ensemble while we were there.
You know, Tommy was speaking to the sense of community as well. And it's funny, that's exactly right. I hadn't really thought about that. When you talk more about that, about the community piece of SVPA, what was it? How would you describe it? And why do you think that it was formed so successfully?
You know, speaking for me, I know that when I came into high school, I was just leaving middle school, which was a really awkward time for me, as I think it is for a lot of people. Yeah,
all of us.
Rough time.
I still haven't gotten out of that time.
Yeah, we carried that, leaves some trauma that we're, all still processing. But when I first got into high school, I didn't really feel like I had a sense of who I was and who my tribe was. Because in middle school, you're just kind of thrown into this collective, and you don't really have much say with the people that you're around. You're sorted into classrooms. Yes. I came from Glenfield Middle School, where you're actually put into houses where you have to stay with the same core group for 3 years.
Glenfield was the arts one that I couldn't get into,
Glenfield was an arts high school, but they had this like weird Harry Potter house system where your first year you're sorted into a house where you have the same teachers and you have the same
yes.
Fellow classmates for your entire middle school.
Yes.
And I have very fond memories of Glenfield. This isn't me wanting to like shit on Glenfield at all, because I really don't, nor in the house. I had some excellent teachers and friends, but at the same time, there wasn't really much agency that I had with the people that I spent time with. And, I had my interests, which were always, more artistic and more theater-based. And I always felt like kind of an outsider, and I never really understood that there were people like me. And, I was also dealing with issues of sexuality, of emerging sexuality at the time, and figuring myself out. So I think for me, I came into high school at such a crossroads in my own life. And what I found was people who were like me, people who had the same interests as me, people who took it as seriously as I did, people who had the same level of passion and talent that I did, people who I thought pushed me to be better. And there was a sense of competition for sure. And it's interesting because before I started working in elementary school, I worked for many years as an assistant director at a high school. And I would recognize, just how important it was to them, just how much it meant to them. And I could see myself there, but, not having the perspective I had as an adult. So I definitely made some choices that were different, that I tried to not maybe feed into the competition beast quite as much as we were. But at the same time, I think that it did help you prepare for the real world. And it did make you better. It did force you to push yourself forward and not rest on your laurels.
For me too, Corey. I don't know if this is true for you today, but still today for me, I have a pretty high bar for my own standard of excellence for myself and other people, and in a lot of ways, I felt like one of the biggest takeaways from me from school was how demanding it was. I remember being quite challenged and pushed outside of my own comfort zone, and we were putting in. I remember Becca and I, we were constantly like specifically voice lessons, and we were trying to do all that stuff,
Yeah.
Corey. That and I say it because it still felt like almost like it wasn't enough, and so I actually want to briefly pivot to the toxicity piece because I do think that everybody that I'm speaking with as part of this episode probably had a fair amount of opportunity over their time, I think, with the School of the Arts. I will say, Corey, my senior year, got cast as Dante in Ragtime, and I really wanted that fucking part, and he was so good. No, but there was a competition in there. But from your perspective, do you talk a little bit about the toxicity and the competition, and if you ever felt that personally or felt caught up in it from either side? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. For me, what sticks in my mind and always will is the whole Les Mis process. And
I might have blacked it out a little bit. But seriously, and share what you will, because I know vaguely, like an idea energetically, but what was it?
So we were in Nebraska. We saw this production of Les Mis. It sort of gave Dearborn the idea to want to do it, and we started talking a lot even then about casting. And he
Oh yeah, because you were both up for Valjean and Mr. T, and would have been great in both. Okay, keep going. Now I know where. Okay.
In Nebraska, Dearborn pretty much told me that he wanted me to play Thénardier. Basically told me that.
Which you're perfect for.
Well, a role that I would still love to play someday, and have not. I got to see you do it, which was fun.
And I would love to do it again, honestly. I mean, that's one of those parts that's... No, truly, Corey, to this day, that's one of those parts that I'm like, what an amazing part it is. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and a great show, and a show that I just adore to this day. So, that began it. And it was like the summer of my freshman year, and we had this conversation, and he was basically like, oh yeah, you would get that role. So then we ended up doing it, and I remember just how arduous the audition process was. Yeah. I mean, he kept us there. I don't remember the exact time, but it had to have been like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, which would never happen today. At least not in the academic settings that I've worked in. You would never.
And what was he doing? Because I remember this. Actually, I do have a distinct memory of you and I singing "Bring 'Em Home" like in the same room together. I think it was. But what was what was he doing? Was he giving us notes? Were we just running through it? What were we doing?
I think he was just going through every single possible combination in his head. Because I remember I literally sang every role. I was singing Valjean, I was singing Javert, I was singing Marius. Like I literally was at every single role, and it just went so long and was so grueling, and just felt very like took everything out of you. You left it all on the table, and
it wasn't necessary, was it?
It wasn't necessary, and I think especially when you're that young, and now myself, having worked as a director with high schoolers, I mean, I think we're much more conscious these days about teen mental health, and just about positive environments, and not across the board, but I do think we have more of an awareness of it today.
Because
and like I
ultimately,
said,
what you were no, you weren't Babette you were Grantaire.
I was the bishop. I was the bishop, and then randomly the Valjean understudy, which would never have.
So was it? But no, but this is interesting to me. So in talking about mental health, like did you feel like that process in particular was actually quite bad for your mental health?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%, because again, I went into it with a certain expectation based on past conversation, which we should probably not have had.
Exactly.
That was another thing that I've since learned as a theater education professional. I don't discuss the casting with the students. It's just not
because
really appropriate.
To be clear, he was kind of saying the same thing to me about Valjean.
Right. And I think he said that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But obviously you can only cast one.
Right.
And that's sort of where I think it got a little questionable and got a little toxic, is that I understand wanting to, again, bring out the best in people and push people. But I do think at times, whether unconsciously or consciously, I couldn't say, I think he did like to pit people against each other.
Yeah.
And
well, it's interesting, Corey, as someone who's in education now too, for example, where I went to college, when I went, there was still a cup program. So they would cup people after from time to time. And it was an incredible competitive environment. That's gone now. But I will say, here's some of the value as I see it, even from then. And I'm not sure if this resonates with what was happening and even at SVPA, but it did prepare me for a sense of competition and an edge in the quote unquote real world. And I guess the question becomes, when do you begin to introduce something like that? I think probably we could safely assume that high school theater isn't the place to be cultivating anything other than a supportive, loving environment. And yet, what we were saying just a little bit ago is that the demand for excellence, or that sense of seriousness, also, I think, cultivated in us a real earnestness to be the best we could. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you 100%. And honestly, as much as I say this, and I definitely still have some obviously lingering resentment or lingering bitterness, at the same time, on the flip side, I actually do agree with you 100%. I think that it was great preparation for what the real world is like. I think it's great preparation for what the business is like. On the flip side of what I was saying about how we're more aware of teens' mental health, I also find that in some ways, I think that there's less of a professional work ethic in young actors today. So it absolutely has its positives and negatives, because I do think that ultimately I benefited from it. And you brought up Ragtime. I mean, I felt that for me, that year, my sophomore year, I felt pretty wounded, right? But then moving forward, I felt like I had some wonderful opportunities, and I had some great opportunities to perform, and I had my moments. And I think it all worked out the way it should have for me in the long run. I really do.
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny because I remember. I mean, I was half kidding, but talking about that, I am kidding. And you were wonderful in Ragtime, but I remember I really wanted Tate. I mean, that was really and I think I would have been much better in that part than I was younger brother. It was not great, but
you were a good young.
Well, whatever. You know what I'm saying. I actually still to this day, Corey. Actually, I auditioned for Tate not too long ago, and it was honestly I feel like I'm finally getting into my Tate eras, and I didn't even get a call back. I was shocked. I really thought I was gonna, like PTSD all over again. So okay, with that in mind, though, when you think back on your time at SVPA, do you ultimately feel like you had a positive experience? Like, do you ultimately look at it positively?
I do completely. It's one of my fondest memories from that period of my life. It's one of my fondest memories developmentally. of course, when you really go back and nitpick, you have your individual moments and traumas, but when looked at as a whole, what an amazing opportunity for me.
Yeah.
One amazing opportunity for, I think, a lot of us
Yeah.
to really develop our craft and to really do things that I think not everyone in our age bracket got to do, and grow as performers and have opportunities to perform that not everyone got to do. So absolutely.
And again,
absolutely.
I'm
I
so
mean, I
sorry
wouldn't change anything.
to mind that
Yeah.
that not everyone got to do. Was that because, do you think, of Pat? And I listen. Interesting. First of all, I should acknowledge that I'm Pat Woodward again. It was not a full-time faculty. It was hired to just do showcase. But again, for me, brought a was there to work. Like, Pat wasn't there to joke around.
No.
Was it them? What was it that took SVPA to a different level?
I think it was a perfect storm of a lot of things. I think absolutely the leadership, the teacher leadership was invaluable. I think that the expertise and the ethos that both Pats brought, certainly laid the foundation for it. But I also think we had very talented people.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. And that's happened. I've seen that too in my career with high school, that you do kind of go through these these eras where you have just a really talented group that walks your way at a certain time, and then there are other times when it's less so.
Yes.
So those that does ebb and flow. So I think it was a combination. I think it was of just the time and place, the people there, but certainly the leadership of Pat and Pat, I think, really set the tone and really, they steered the ship.
All right. So here's my last question for you. If you had to name, essentially what was probably your most impressionable moment or memory from your high school theater experience, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. Well, strangely enough, I think it might have been that Les Mis callback I just talked about. I remember it very vividly, certainly much more vividly than I did any of the other callbacks or audition processes. I also remember getting that first callback for Showcase my freshman year, and then getting cast in that first show. That sticks with me really strongly. It's I think a lot of the firsts from my freshman year really stick out in my mind. The first general interest meeting, the first Sprock Bowl, the first masquerade, like all those first events really stuck with me. But when it comes to a singular experience, I think it was that Les Mis audition that really stuck with me, because I felt like I never fought harder.
What was the
for something,
Sprock
and I
Bowl?
still didn't win it. With the Sprock Bowl, that was the event where we had a fake football game.
Yes.
In Anderson Park, and the whole point was that no one really knew how to play football.
That's
so it was
funny.
Just sort of
Did I ever go to that?
I think you were there.
What was Masquerade?
I remember seeing you there.
What was Masquerade?
Masquerade was the big party in December.
Yes, it was like
that was.
Where did we do it?
Yes, we did it different places. I think we did it at a.
Yes, it was like at a ballroom.
Yes. Yeah, we got some different venues for it. Yeah.
And what was this general interest meeting? Corey, you said 3 things. I'm like, what are these things? What was the general interest meeting?
The general interest meeting was the very first meeting.
Oh, like here's
the
what
first
SVPA
or second week of
is.
school. Yeah. And I remember Heather Woodward was the president at the time.
Yes.
And I was so intimidated by her. And it's funny because I subsequently became very close with the Woodward family, with the whole Woodward family. But that first time, I just remember being so intimidated, just thinking oh man, I can't. I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if they're going to accept me. They all seem so cool. And even though none of us were really all that cool.
Exactly. Let's be clear. Do you know, I do have a distinct memory of the elections for SVPA, and because Tommy was president when I think I wanted to be president too. Was I in anything?
Weren't you vice president? Or am I making that up?
I don't think so. I don't think I was voted in. I don't think I didn't have that Tommy charm, you know. But I do remember us being quite serious about these I mean, this is what I mean. This whole world. I mean, for me, it was high school. I don't really remember much else, and I did a lot of other things, but my life sort of felt semi-surrounded and about SVPA. Was that kind of true for you too?
100%.
Yeah.
If you ask me who taught me
exactly
11th grade English, I couldn't tell you. If you ask me like what classes I took sophomore year, I couldn't tell you. That's not what stuck in my mind, but I could tell you every year what shows we did, what parts I played. That's really what high school was.
Exactly.
That was the reason I came to school.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Exactly.
It really was.
There was a teacher. It might have been Too Proud. I can't remember what show it was. There was a teacher that came to see a show. She was an English arts teacher from Montclair High School, and I can picture her. She was tall, skinny, shortish hair with glasses, a white woman, and I saw her in passing it, and we didn't even get a chance to say hello, but we were waving at each other, and I couldn't remember who she was. To your point, Corey, I'm like, I know her, but I really only know Dr. V, Pat, you know, the and Pat and that whole world.
Yeah.
If you were in SVPA, that's who I knew. I didn't really know anybody else. Well, also for those listening, you know, Corey is so uniquely talented in so many ways, and I do think, Corey, that you're right that part of what made that experience in that moment was because there was this nucleus of talented individuals that were quite serious about the work they were doing, as appreciated by these teachers that then subsequently rightfully took advantage of it, sometimes positively and sometimes less so.
Yeah. But we're all human.
Exactly.
You know?
And your kids, I know, are lucky to have you today. Really, I kind of wish you were running SVPA. You know, I emailed whoever the woman is who's running it. She never even went back. She never even acknowledged my email.
Really?
Which was odd.
I think I know who it is if it's still the same person.
Melissa? I'll say her name. I don't care. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Is her name Melissa? Michelle?
I thought it was Brenda.
Oh, maybe I'm talking to someone else. I don't know.
Brenda, yeah, I thought Brenda was still doing it. No last name.
Well, it should be you. Anyway, thank you, Corey.
You're so welcome.
This will be the end of our sort of trio here of my let's call it regression back to high school. Not really, but you know, I think it's fair to say that SVPA, the School of Visual and Performing Arts at Montclair High School, was a bit of a unique entity in our little public high school, you know, because it was a really special place, and you two, in particular, were a crucial dynamic duo, both as, you know, student and performer, and also, Bunny, I think there were moments when it would be safe to say that in some ways you were practically co-running SVPA, and I want to say that. Well, first of all, I want to say as a semi caveat to that, I think that there could be a negative connotation of us, you know, being that of the idea of well, specifically the three of us, you know, the three of us were all in SVPA, but it speaks to the community and world of that. And Bunny, if I may, your passion for not only Becca, but, you know, when I talk about you, I often call you a surrogate mother to me during those years, and you know why. You really looked after me and Becca, and fed for so many others the passion that was fueling them. So it's important that I say that, and we'll talk more about those dynamics. But can we start with, for each of you, what your first specific memory of SVPA was?
Sure, I'll go first. I was thinking about this the other day in preparation, and my very first memory of SVPA is getting up to audition as a freshman for I think in the fall they would always do the showcase, and then the spring they would do the musical. Yep. But Mr. Dearborn would be there with Pat. Pat and Pat would be together for the auditions, and I remember going up to audition, and then Mr. Dearborn walked up. I'm very nervous freshman year, and then Mr. Dearborn walked up onto the stage. They would have us audition. You remember, on the stage. Yeah. It was not in like a room. It was on the stage in the theater, and he walked up and he goes, "You're very talented, but it's a little shiny on your forehead." And that's my first memory, was Mr. Dearborn being the first person to draw attention to my skincare routine, but I suppose also to take me seriously enough to tell me that he thought I should be there and I had some work to do.
I like they said take me seriously, because I think if I may, that's a consistent.
That was a huge piece.
Yeah, they really
very
did.
Very big piece.
They saw us. What about you, Bunny? What was your first memory of SVPA?
Well, my first memory of SVPA precedes you and Becca, but so this is kind of a weird segue. I met Mr. Dearborn and got exposed to SVPA when Alex was in middle school, and he was doing Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Alex is Becca's younger sister.
And she was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old. And they were looking for cute kids that could sing okay. And that worked for Al. And she was definitely cute and pretty and loved to smile and loved the idea of being on stage. So she was recruited as one of the children's chorus in Joseph. And when I met him and Alex met him, he was frightening. Absolutely. He was frightening. He had a very large personality. Yeah. And I thought to myself, wow, I hope my 10-year-old can handle this, But the experience turned out to be a great one. So by the time Rebecca went to high school, I knew that it was going to be a great environment for her to explore all the theater things she wanted to do.
And I didn't know that you had met Mr. Dearborn prior. Had you met Pat Woodward prior to, or was Showcase the first time you met Pat?
Yeah, Showcase was the first time I met Pat Woodward.
Got it. And just for context sake, what over your years, but did you, because Alex kept going with SVPA a bit after Becca left, or no?
Yeah, Alex did Cats, but
right.
Exactly. I think junior year was Al's last year. She didn't participate senior year. So maybe 1 year past Becca.
And Becca, for you,
yeah,
because your mom was so involved, did that, what was that for you? And I'll give full context to say, Becca, for those listening, is a super talent. Becca and I were our own dynamic duo growing up. Again, I'll say I'm super grateful, Bunny and Becca, that you both sort of let me in some ways tag along. But we did everything together, and Becca's a super talent. But, there was always conversations about the idea of nepotism. So what was it for you, for your mom to be so involved?
First of all, we're like 20 years later. So it would be really interesting to have had this conversation 10 or 15 years ago when the memories were a little stronger, because when I think back now on the SVPA, I don't know if I've blocked that part out, but it doesn't really, it is not at the forefront of my memory. And part of it might be because of the way I was cast, which is to say, Josh, I can't remember your entire casting journey through high school, but I think that Pat made it. I had to earn the roles, and it really happened junior and senior year that I got some really big roles. I think that, before that, maybe this was, part of this was because mom was so involved. I'm not sure, but I really felt like I was I mean, I really was like in the chorus, and, in showcase, I got 1 number. And so I think that maybe my own concept of myself in that was that I wasn't getting special treatment. Maybe there was also a sense of, I think mom and I don't have memories of not getting along with you at that time in high school. I think, towards like the college audition process was more stressful, but I don't remember mom being up in the social part of it. And so I don't have memories of that. If it was happening, I'm not sure I was totally aware, to be honest. Yeah. I didn't feel Bunny as omnipresent. I felt like, oh yeah, she's like supporting you and I, really, our pursuits, and that of, I think, a lot of other kids, I guess, in retrospect at the time. Yeah.
And for both of you, because, I just want to say, Bunny, I think Pat Woodward and Pat Dearborn were genuinely your friends. Let's also be clear too. It's not that it was just about the SVPA. These were people you would go and hang out with. Kirk and Pat and Barbara, you would hang out with these people. So what can you talk a little bit about Pat and Pat for each of you? What it was that you think made them such, if you do, I don't want to put, I'm just making assumptions, such special artists and specifically teachers, and made that place so unique? What was it, in your opinion?
You want to go first, Beck?
Sure, I'll go first. For me, Pat Woodward was the first person that made me understand how important craft was. I just have distinct memories of Pat Woodward. I never have to say Woodward, right? Because everyone's name is Pat. Pat really instilling a sense of like the craft, right? The craft of, in terms of training. Also, I was very good friends with her daughter, Heather. And so I was watching Heather, who was also in the SVPA, modeled a lot of like, how do you pursue this? What kind of classes are you taking in school, outside of school? And so Pat was really someone who brought that into my consciousness as a student. And I think that Mr. Dearborn, as I mentioned earlier, really his magical superpower, other than $30,000 sets for high school students, was that he treated us like grown-ups, in that in a positive way, in a you guys want to do this and you want to do this at the highest level, then I'm going to treat you like you're doing it at the highest level, and I'm going to take you as seriously as you take yourselves. And there is something very, very precious about that, I think, for a high school student who is looking to pursue this more seriously. And I think Mr. Dearborn, it felt like we were in our own, off-Broadway theater, right? Yeah. In terms of just the standard of excellence that he expected from us. That's really what I remember most. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And a lot of Shih Tzus. Yes.
Fucking Shih Tzus. Funny.
A lot of Shih Tzus.
What about you?
So you want to know about what my impressions about Pat and Pat, and sort of an overview. So, Pat Woodward, to me, was the consummate director. And I had, as, both a friend and a parent, a real respect for what she created. She put, not only did she direct and achieve extraordinary things, but she also wrote and conceived of these very special, musical pieces, whatever you want to call them, reviews, whatever you want to say. She put a lot of work into it. Now, Pat Dearborn, on the other hand, I thought he's an extraordinary art director, like beyond. Mm-hmm. And everything to him was super duper visual. And while I never got involved, I witnessed both of you, once you had learned quite a bit, maybe questioning him more in terms of, I guess, what Becca calls craft, about, choices that the actors are making along the way in these serious musicals. But one of his, besides the $30,000 sets that he did for less than $30,000 most of the, because that I can definitely attest to, because I knew about what was going on with the money. I would say that his other superpower was vision. He had he definitely, each thing that he directed, he had a specific vision for, like how he wanted, in terms of casting, what the vision was, in terms of what it would look like, how it would sound. So, like the nitty gritty directing of a particular musical number, maybe not, but the overall vision, I thought he had a very special way of looking at.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you this because we're not going to be able to ask anybody else this episode. What do you think? What did you see in Becca? Did you go to Glenfield, Becca?
I did. Yeah.
Glenfield, I think, was the arts magnet.
Arts magnet, yeah.
Because I couldn't get into it because I went to Mount Hebron when I first moved to Jersey.
Right, you were zoned differently, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or there was a wait list because Glenfield was the art school, and I was just coming in. And anyway, happily became the star of the science magnet school, middle school. Not a problem. But,
there's a lesson there too. Yeah.
Yes, there is. But Bunny, when you watched Becca sort of come into her own and flourish at SVPA, did it surprise you? What did you see the SVPA did for Becca over those 4 years?
It gave her self-confidence. It helped her to understand, who she was, what she was good at. I guess, our family's pretty musical, coming from my mom and my brother somewhat, but I think,
and now his son I just saw on Facebook.
Yeah,
very musical.
That's a sidebar, Josh, for after you stop recording.
Fair.
But anyway, so I think it really helped her with her confidence. It gave her a group of friends. It gave her a community. It gave her a place that she felt safe, that she could excel. For Becca, high school, while she did very well in high school and was a very good student, none of that really made any difference. Her day started at about 3:00 or whatever you guys were done with school. That's when the day started. That was the price you paid for having to, be in the SVPA. If you could have gone to the SVPA and not gone to your classes, that would have been a choice.
That's what I did.
But that was
similar to the end of high school I think we got down to, Josh, I think we somehow, do you remember the end? We somehow both managed to have one class and then a 6-week internship where we just did theater.
What was the internship? Yeah. We did an internship?
There was at the end of our senior year, there was some option to opt out of all classes.
Yes.
And just do theater. I don't know how.
I interned at DGRW, the agency.
Yeah, I don't remember where I interned, but I remember that I did. Yes. I think it was also at an agency or something. Yeah,
I don't know what you were doing.
Yes, we know.
No one.
I don't know. Listen, we're 20 years out, right? So I have a young kid now, so she's too young to think about this. But I do wonder if, I think, Josh, can you imagine Bunny or your mom at the time telling us, don't do this? I'm not really sure it's up to a parent by the time their kid is a freshman in high school, whether or not their kid commits. I think maybe it's about a mindfulness around what kind of values is the theater program, instilling, and one that the SVPA had, which was great and maybe caused you and I to make certain decisions, Josh, is excellence. Yes. We are going to be excellent, and it is going to be the best and at a professional level. And I wonder, maybe something a parent wants to look at in their kid's program is are they doing it for fun? I don't know if we were doing it for fun. I think if we really look at it, and I wonder, we had a lot of fun, but just maybe that's something that parents want to think about is what are the values of this program, and also what's the culture.
Well, but what you're also what I'm also curious about from both your perspectives. There was criticism of SVPA being too serious, or being too, what Corey talked about was the toxicity in casting, or the toxicity around the competition of SVPA, which, let me just say, for me, was very helpful. The competitive nature of SVPA was helpful for me because this industry remains brutal, remains cutthroat. And so I'm so grateful to have had someone who, specifically Becca, we're really talented. Yeah, who cares? Meaning, Dearborn specifically, and Pat. I mean, I remember you and I singing "What Could Be Better," and "Last Night of the World." I remember us, in the summer stuff with Pat, being really challenged. I mean, really, people saying, calling our bullshit. So, but from both of your perspectives, do you think that SVPA verged into territory that was inappropriate for high school level artists?
It's a mixed bag to answer that from a mother's perspective, because Becca was really talented. If you had a child that was average or maybe a little bit above average, then I think it could have done a disservice. And I think that there were, some kids who came out of it with inflated egos that thought like more, that they could accomplish more than they actually were able to, or even get into the kinds of professional programs like conservatories. So, I think there was some disappointment, but I didn't experience it in that way with Rebecca. But there might have been. I think there were some kids, maybe more. Some of them, you got to remember that some of the kids coming out of Alex's class that are like 3 years younger than you guys, like some of them like had very, significant high school experiences and thought that they belonged in conservatories, and it didn't turn out to work out for them in that way.
So that's a false hope.
That's interesting. I think it's interesting to hear Corey. I mean, I'll listen on the episode to hear what he said, about the toxicity. I guess it's like important to acknowledge a privilege. For a number of reasons, it sounds like I escaped maybe some of that toxicity from various factors, various reasons why I maybe didn't experience it. And, Pat were hard on me, but they were not. Do I ever think it was crossing a line? No, I don't. I think, I was laughing, Josh, when you said, it got us ready for college, because I still found university and the conservatory atmosphere at university to be super challenging. And that's even after the SVPA, I found it was even more cutthroat, and I think your school cut people. We were not, being cut. Like once you were there, but just it was brutal. The casting process, not being the top dog anymore. That was really, tough at Miami. And so, for me, the SVPA was a safe haven, and an oasis of being in a really large high school and having a place, where I really felt like safe. And I avoided, I reflect back on my, childhood, and I was never bullied. I mean, I somehow just that, I think being in the theater let me be my weird self in a place that was okay to be that thing. And that was really special. I do wonder, if it could have been a slightly more balanced program that served all the kids. It seems to me like you and I, Josh, were probably some of the kids served best by it, and a few of our other peers, in terms of the level of intensity and how demanding it was of us.
I think that's right. And I think
Yeah.
I think I don't always.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say this.
Not easy to admit, but when I reflect, yeah.
No. I appreciate that. And actually, when Corey was talking about the casting toxicity, it was primarily around Les Mis, which was was probably our one of our biggest show that we all collaborated on, because we briefly talked, but neither Tommy or Corey went to London on our wild London trip, where
I still would love to be in the room when our parents decided that it was Mom, who I would love to know what you and Jennifer and Emily's mother, who else went on that trip? I mean,
Jennifer just said, if Bunny says it's okay, it's okay.
that tracks. But I mean, Josh, have you talked about this London trip that there was what was it, 5 of us, 6 of us?
Maybe more.
I think there was 8 or 10.
8 or 10 of us, one adult in London.
Well, I'll briefly just say, because I didn't tell the full story, so I'll briefly say, right when we arrive at Heathrow, we get there, and Patrick Dearborn is our only chaperone, which is also still shocking to me.
Only adult guardian, also shocking to me. Also,
I'm shocked you didn't go, Bunny. Why didn't you go?
I said she couldn't.
You said
I'm sure I said I won't go if you're going. I'm sure.
No. He wanted me to go.
Yeah.
I said, he wanted me to go because I could get along with him.
Well, and he's with a bunch of kids, but the second we get to Heathrow, we're going down a very, very, very long escalator.
And he falls.
Mom, you're ruining this story.
Exactly. He proceeded to drop his luggage and go to get it, and instead literally tumbles down the escalator.
That image is seared in my mind. That moment of my life we were all in shock. We thought he had perished. I mean, he should not have survived that fall.
Cut to 5 minutes later, he's in his underwear, bloodied up. He bloodied up at the bottom of the escalator. We're standing around in this police office, and he broke his ribs. So he proceeded to spend practically the entire trip in his hotel room or hostel, whatever it was, while let's be clear, we can say it now because it's so many years later.
Can we?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. We've never really talked about this with Bunny. But we were just 8 17-year-olds running rampant around London doing all manner of things. We saw 2 shows a day and went drinking. I mean, that was pretty much the plan.
Becca, it was called Los Locos.
Los Locos. And there was, do you remember Italian?
They would not card us. Your mom knows this. They would not card us. So we would, and by the way, there was one girl, Sunny, who, this is so random, but I used to do super quick stints, of Ain't Too Proud when the guy would get sick on the road. So I jumped out there, and Sunny, it was where is she living now? It was in Reno, Nevada, that she was at the show.
Yeah.
It was so crazy. But Sunny, who looked like an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
and was knocking them back with the best of us at Los Locos. So this London trip was absolutely the thing. But I will also say this, and actually it kind of speaks to this. What a special experience.
Yeah. I mean, we saw so much theater, and it was wonderful.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Was.
Okay, so this will take me to my last question for the two of you.
Yeah.
How did that whole high school theater experience in all the ways shape your family dynamic or your own relationship. And just for context sake, you know, to have, I said this, I just did a production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and there was all a bunch of kids in the show, and there was two casts, two Charlies, all the kids, and there was one family whose parents were there at every show, and one, I never met them. And I said to them, I said, you know, you should be very grateful that your parents are here. And I said to the parents, I said, this is very special that they want to see you and do your thing. So it's partially why I'm giving context for this. For both of you, how do you feel the high school theater experience shaped your dynamic as a family, or specifically your relationship?
Becca?
Mom.
You're going first. 'Cause I have nothing to say.
I mean, I guess Bunny wants to save it for family therapy one day, but I'll say that only now that I am a parent, and my daughter's only 3.5, but only now that I'm a parent, am I really beginning to appreciate what my parents did for me, you know, including how they showed up for me in high school. And so I think that how it shaped our family, I think that remains to be seen. You know, give us another 10 years.
Sure.
But I think that it kept me on the rails. Actually, something I want to share is that I was diagnosed with ADHD only after I had a child. And I'm mentioning this because I think the reason that nobody in high school noticed, including my family, that maybe I was struggling was because I had the SVPA and I had a community and teachers and people that loved me, feeding me and my passion and hyper focus in a way. And I just think, you know, I'm really, really lucky. I mean, I had a really lucky high school experience. You know, I don't think it was typical. And I think my parents went along for the ride. And sure, hindsight is 2020. And there's another podcast one day, maybe we talk about conservatory versus a BA and then an MFA, or none at all. I don't know if you've done a podcast about which degree and why, but I think that if we just look at those 4 years alone, it brought a lot of joy to our family in that time in our life. And when I hear about other people's high school experiences, I feel very, very lucky. And I don't know if you feel that way, Mom, about my high school experience, but I think that overall, sum total, it gave me so much and therefore gave our family a lot. Like, I was a relatively well-balanced kid, you know, and that's no small thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, you know, as a parent of 2 daughters, Becca had a really good high school experience and looks back on it with a great deal of joy and happiness, as she just articulated, whereas her sister had really not such a great high school experience. And so I'm especially grateful to have had one kid that had a really good one, because, you know, it's set up for, you know, I had plenty of, of kind of the opposite of what Becca experienced, and Joy. I had a lot of struggle and trying to find herself and all these other things that happened with her sister, who's just a couple of years younger. And, you know, I think, I don't know. I think SVPA was a special place. It was also, a magical time based on the people that were there at that moment in time.
The alchemy was special when we were there, and not just because of us, I think, but I think in general, the people that were there.
And if you even think about some of like the sidebar things, like, somebody like having, such a special relationship with someone like Dashiell Katz, who is so much younger than you, and having him be a part of, two different significant productions, and just even, I mean, I don't, even some of the musicians that you worked with, and how, Adam Shapiro is still a very, advanced and wonderful piano player, and,
Emmett.
very different path, but, Michael Bloom it has special certain type of talent that he's exploring still today. But, I don't think that every high school theater program has, as much of that. And I think I made a choice after Becca and Alex had both graduated. Like sometimes the Blooms would call me or email me and say, do you want to go to see a show or go see a showcase? And I always said no, because I didn't want to compare what had been to what might be now. And it might have been just as good or better, but I didn't even want to give it a chance. And that's probably something small of me. So.
Well, I can understand wanting to keep I can have compassion for like wanting to keep the capsule of the memory, it was a very special time and there was a lot of alchemy to it. I think Josh, don't you think, when you think about that time for us?
I do think about that. And I think about, you're using the word alchemy, and for me, when I think about my high school theater experience, there's so many pieces of it that mean so much to me. But for example, we don't talk, the three of us, much at all, and yet I consider you family. You have to know that. I consider you family. I probably talk to you more than I talk to my other family. But that's a story for another time. If the three of us, if the two of you hadn't accepted me and we grew together, but at the core of it was, you're saying it, was these other people and I'm lumping the two. It's not just Becca and I who were performing together.
No,
I'm lumping us together because, no joke, to this day, when I neti pot, I still think about the three of us in the kitchen. Still to this day, because I neti pot a lot still, and I'll never forget the first time doing that because we were all sort of growing together. I love you both, and I'm so appreciative that you took the time to come on. So, hello all. I know we didn't tell you this at the beginning of today's episode, but in putting it all together, bit by bit, we realized that this actually needed to be a two-parter. Because we just had those three great interviews with Becca and Bunny and Tommy and Corey. And next week is actually when we're going to drop part 2 on the power of high school theater, where Mike sits down with his two teachers, Brian Jennings and Joni Weisfeld. And then we'll do a little summation. So... we like to keep things long here at Creative Risk, but you'll have to wait for part 2 of this episode till next week, and that's when we'll drop our comfort food performances as well. And as always, our Patreon members will get it a few days earlier on the Monday. Okay, bye, friends.